About it quite a bit in worship team, and we chime the bowl first to ground ourselves and prepare for worship, and second to extend the same courtesy to our pianists that we do to our speakers. So the bowl is to remind you that we're in worship, and we'd like to listen to the prelude. Thank you. Wow, good morning. What a beautiful way to begin. I want to welcome everybody. I see, not with my reading glasses on, but I see people I haven't seen in a while, people I saw yesterday. It's just beautiful to have all of you here. Here at UUTC, we welcome everyone, whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever spiritual paths you may have traveled or are traveling. We welcome you to the Unitarian Universalists of Transylvania County, where our mission is to support individual spiritual journeys and to promote social, economic, and environmental justice. So our theme this month, which is justice and equity, is always in season for us. I know we've been trying to minimize announcements, but there are a few that are just crying out to be made. I know that our minister, Reverend Bob Jillian, is here, although not in the pulpit today. He's in the choir today, for which we're grateful. And I just wanted to recognize him. And I'll introduce our guest speaker more fully a little later in the service. But meanwhile, please join me in welcoming the Reverend Eve Stevens. Is here with me. A few weeks ago, we had an announcement from Reverend Bob that there was a petition to assist us in participating in the democratic process by placing happened to be a school board member or school board candidate here in the county on the ballot. Her quest succeeded, has already succeeded. But you will see another one out in the front lobby, which is for a district judge who likewise will need signatures in order to have a place on the ballot. And that's all that it's appropriate for me to say from the pulpit. But it is an opportunity for you to participate in the democratic process. And you can ask me if you have questions. Speaking of the democratic process, immediately after this service, 5 minutes after this service, I'm told, we will be having our congregational meeting to consider changes to the bylaws here. Shouldn't be a very long one, famous last words. But it will be here in the sanctuary. Members will be able to vote, but all are invited to attend. Now, in this community, we find that sorrows are eased and joys are multiplied by sharing them among friends in this beloved community. Some joys and sorrows have been written ahead of time, and I will walk down and pick them up and read them. And the Reverend Eve Stevens has agreed to be our lighter. We're going to try this, and there's a backup. And I'm going to read these so that our listeners at home can hear them through the mic and so that all of you can hear them. Our flowers this morning are with a candle of joy. And thanks to Reverend Bob and longtime friends at UUTC for concern and encouragement during Jane Carter's surgery and recovery. And Reverend Jean Rowe, our member, reports that circumstances have changed around her husband Lackey's decisions. He will not be withholding food and drink, and he has been accepted into hospice care for his transition. So a candle for Jean and Lackey. And let's have another candle for any joys and sorrows that remain unvoiced for whatever reason. They're too tender to yet share, or they're too joyous to burst out at this moment. But we hold them in our hearts. We know that there are joys and sorrows amongst us all. And we'll light one more candle for any joys and sorrows that have been shared in the chat during real time as we are streamed. One of our opening rituals here at UUTC is to recognize each other's worth and dignity with a brief greeting while remaining seated, so please. And now I'll invite Reverend Eve forward to open our service.
Thank you all for having me, those of you here in the room and those of you at home. I was very excited that it was a choir Sunday. I feel very lucky to be here. We're going to open the service with a story. Over 60 years ago, 4 students who were attending the Agricultural and Technical College in Greensboro, North Carolina, became friends. They met in each other's dorm rooms after classes, they hung out on the weekends, and they got close in part because they had a shared history and they had shared hopes for the future. As young Black men, they had grown up hearing stories about people who refused to bend to the white ideas of the day about how things should be. And throughout their freshman year, these 4 friends could often be found at Woolworth's department store. And though the lunch area was segregated, they could go to the sales counter and pick up anything from a shirt to the latest top 20 album. And at the time, Woolworths was one of the largest and wealthiest retail chains in the world, a store that pioneered modern marketing and supply chain and customer service techniques, a true American institution. The founder had been so wealthy at one point that he was able to pay in cash to have the largest building in the world at that time built. So on February 1st, 1960, these 4 freshmen entered this behemoth of American industry and sat down at the whites-only lunch counter. They were refused service and asked to leave, but they stayed. They sat and they quietly did their schoolwork until closing time. In the middle of winter, 1960, a time when civil rights progress felt hard frozen, 4 friends planted a seed in the American consciousness. From this and countless other seeds planted before, the energy of a movement shifted. It was subtle at first, just a warm breeze on a cold day. But in the years to come, 70,000 people would participate in sit-in demonstrations around the country. And after a widespread boycott of Woolworths, they lost 1/3 of their revenue in just 6 months, which came out to be about $2 million in today's money. They finally relented and desegregated their lunch counters. Before any of what followed could happen, unfolding in full living color, 4 friends found the courage to plant a seed with faith that spring would come.
And now I ask you to rise in body or spirit or remain seated for our opening hymn, Spirit of Life. We will sing it through twice, and the words will be on the screens.
All the stirrings of the
We'll now move more deeply into our worship by lighting our chalice, symbol of Unitarian Universalism. And with words from the Reverend Tracy Johnson, I'll light the chalice, and then if you will please join me in reading. Light of our creative spirits, light of our wise souls, light of our wondering and curious minds, light of love for this place, this people, this work, illuminate our hearts and the spaces between them in this sacred time of unfolding. Blessed be. Now, give us the words of wisdom.
All right, this is words of wisdom for all ages. So if there's any responses and the youngest people in the room, I will give you dibs, but there's no pressure. The rest of you can speak up too. So we're going to hear a story in a moment about somebody learning that it takes equal parts hard work and faith to grow a garden. So does anybody here have a garden? Yeah? Very good, very good. Does anybody know, what do you have to do? What do you have to do to set a garden up to grow? Good for you. I totally understand, so don't put me on the spot. Prepare the soil. Prepare the soil. Pull the weeds. That's right. Plant the seeds. Yes, exactly. Water. Sunshine. So, and more weeds. More weeds. That's my experience mostly. So you really have to put in your part. You've got to do something to make that garden grow. But it also requires faith. For me, a very difficult theological concept. Does anybody want to take a stab at what faith means?
When you plant the seed, it will actually grow.
That is perfect. That's right. So one way I think of it is faith is trusting that something you haven't seen yet, something not fully in your control, will happen. Trusting that. So I think Frog and Toad can say it better than me, so I'm going to read this story called The Garden. Frog was in his garden when Toad came walking by. "What a fine garden you have, Frog," he said. "Yes," said Frog, "it is very nice, but it was hard work." "I wish I had a garden," said Toad. "Well, here are some flower seeds. Plant them in the ground," said Frog, "and soon you will have a garden." "How soon?" asked Toad. "Quite soon," said Frog. So Toad ran home. He planted the flower seeds. "Now seeds," said Toad, "start growing." Toad walked up and down a few times. The seeds did not start to grow. Toad put his head close to the ground and said loudly, "Now seeds, start growing." Toad looked at the ground again. The seeds did not start to grow. Toad put his head very close to the ground and shouted, "Now seeds, start growing." Frog came running up the path. "What is all the noise?" he asked. "My seeds will not grow," said Toad. "Well, you're shouting too much," said Frog. "These poor seeds are afraid to grow." "My seeds are afraid to grow?" asked Toad. "Of course," said Frog. "Leave them alone for a few days. Let the sun shine on them. Let the rain fall on them. Soon your seeds will start to grow." That night, Toad looked out of his window. "Drat," said Toad, "my seeds have not started to grow. They must be afraid of the dark." Toad went out to his garden with some candles. "I will read the seeds a story," said Toad. "Then they will not be afraid." Toad read a long story to his seeds. All the next day, Toad sang songs to his seeds. He read poems to his seeds. He played music for his seeds. Toad looked at the ground. The seeds still did not start to grow. "What shall I do?" cried Toad. "These must be the most frightened seeds in the whole world." Then Toad felt very tired, and he fell asleep. "Toad, Toad, wake up," said Frog. "Look at your garden." Toad looked at his garden. Little green plants were coming up out of the ground. "At last," shouted Toad, "my seeds have stopped being afraid to grow." "And now you will have a nice garden too," said Frog. "Yes," said Toad, "but you were right, Frog. It was very hard work."
Now, do we have a chalice bearer? Peace be with you and our blessing as you leave us now. I don't know how I can follow up on Arnold Lobel, Frog and Toad, but but this reading is beautiful, was selected by Reverend Eve and is by Richard Rohr from his book, Adam's Return. Liminal space is holy. It is the space when we are betwixt and between, have left one room but have not yet entered the next room. Any hiatus between stages of life, stages of faith, jobs, loves, or relationships. It is that graced time when we are not certain or in control, when something genuinely new can happen. Much of the work of human destiny itself is to get people into liminal space and to keep them there long enough to learn something essential and genuinely new. It is the ultimate teachable space.
Have I got? Yep, sure enough. We're going to sing a song now by John Rutter, a composer that we have come to know and love. He composed not only the music, but also wrote the words. And the title is Distant Land. And it's about seeing a distant land, and then hearing the song from the distant land, and then touching the hand in the distant land, and then the distant land approaches, and it's a land of freedom, freedom, freedom. The song fits in very well with this month's theme of justice and equity. Justice and equity can only come when there is freedom. And it also fits in, pushing a little bit with the approach of spring, where we have to have faith that it is coming again. There's a distant land, but it's approaching, and we're approaching it. Distant Land by John Rutter.
I see a distant land, it shines
The Reverend Eve Stevens. Well, first I just have to say this. Working with Reverend Eve has been an absolute joy. She's encouraging, empathetic, full of ideas, vivacious, and did I mention fun? I hope it's been as rewarding to plan this service for you as it has been for me. Eve grew up in the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Clemson, South Carolina, so she's a long time UU. That's where she discovered her love of congregational life and began to think about ministry. She ventured to upstate New York for college, studied history, and met her husband, Steve. I'm sorry to say his last name is not Stevens. That would have been a great story. They headed to New York City next, where Eve studied social ethics and pastoral counseling at Union Theological Seminary. Once ordained, Eve served as a minister for 4 years each at the UU Church of Utica, New York, and the UU community of Charlotte, North Carolina. Currently, she lives in Asheville and is a health coach there at Anatomy of Change, her business. And we're so glad she decided to come south. Reverend Eve Stevens.
You've been very patient with me, and it's been wonderful working with you too. That story of the Greensboro Four really re-caught my attention recently. I was driving after exercising very early in the morning, and the reporter on the radio was telling the story to mark the anniversary of that powerfully subversive action. That moment when 4 young people with no certain outcome promise, no guarantees, sat down and refused to move, planting themselves in the midst of a powerful tension, the tension between the way things were and how they could be. Of the many stories on the radio that morning, that one stuck with me the longest, in part because I had never realized that that sit-in took place on February 1st. And February 1st is a date that has become dear to me because I have learned that it is the day of an ancient Celtic holiday called Imbolc. Imbolc means in the belly in Gaelic. That is not yet born, taking shape in the darkness, gathering strength and form that we can't see yet. In Ireland, Imbolc was the time when sheep were drawing closer to birthing their babies, and the day when new life and the sustenance that it brings to community were closer than they had been in a long time. Imbolc honors the goddess Brigid, and she draws close on that day to offer her blessing. Brigid, both in the form of the pagan goddess and also the Christianized saint, is said to watch over thresholds. As legend has it, Brigid herself was born on the doorway of her mother's home, not quite inside or outside, not here or there. And her energy, her power, lies in that space between, the tension between winter and spring, past and future, sleep and awakening. Her image graces the doorways of maternity wards in Ireland to be with women laboring long hours to bring new life into the world. And outside of Ireland, in other earth-based traditions, Imbolc marks the moment when the goddess is said to have just healed from the effort of laboring through the longest night of the year to give birth again to the sun. Imbolc and February with it marks the turning point when the goddess has healed just enough to find her footing, testing if she can eat something more substantial than broth, curious if she is up for a longer walk. February is a time part fragile, part strong. Not a celebration of certainty, not the bold, brightly colored arrival of spring, not a declaration of victory. Imbolc makes no promises that we are through with long nights. Instead, this is the moment after a knee replacement, when you transfer your weight from the chair to your own feet for the first time and, leaning on whatever support is nearby, sense what it's like to stand now and what is required if you would like to move with less pain. This is the moment after a vicious encounter with depression, when you have felt overwhelmed, lost, depleted, numb for so long. It's the moment when you brush your teeth and smooth your hair, put on clothing, tie shoes, and push your way outside to risk contact with people and things, not yet certain that you're up to it. It's the tentative smile exchanged after a fight. In the February of our lives and our surroundings, hope is not shiny or grand. It's the Lenten roses blooming amidst dead leaves. Not shiny or grand, but precious all the same. This is the moment easily overlooked when we have that fleeting realization that hope is not foolish, not an empty wish, not energy wasted. We were right to long for new life, to want a different way. Though we sometimes go a very long time in the cold without tangible evidence. Though the most obvious and colorful signs that what we hope for will come to pass lie dormant underground a long time. Faith, too, trusting that something we haven't seen yet, something not fully in our control, will happen, will come to pass. Faith, too, is not foolish. It's so hard to hold that tension, so hard not to just let go of the rope, to let go of faith, to choose the way things are, to choose what we have known, what we know right now, and stop the effort of holding with both hands the rope that is pulling us towards something we know is possible but can't see yet. Those 4 students sitting at a segregated lunch counter, quietly doing their schoolwork until closing, planted themselves in that betwixt and between space, both fragile and strong, and planted a seed in the American consciousness. As Khalil Gibran says, every seed is a longing. Every seed is a longing. They were longing for a new way of life, a way they could not see yet. They wanted to sit side by side with their white neighbors and something much larger, of course. And where was the guarantee that what they hoped for would come? Where was the certainty? At the time they sat at that lunch counter, it too was an election year, and the Democratic candidate, John F. Kennedy, was avoiding any mention of racial equality or civil rights, hoping to secure the Southern vote. It hadn't been that long since activist Reverend Ralph Abernathy's home and church were bombed in retaliation for his work to integrate the Montgomery bus system. And most Southern states were committed to a policy of mass resistance to the Supreme Court's order to integrate schools. And still, those students sat on the threshold between what was and what could be. They held tight to the tension. Through the in-between, that graced time when we are not certain or in control, as Richard Rohr put it. It is in this time before winter has left us and before spring has arrived that we learn about ourselves. Are we able to trust the unfolding of something we haven't seen yet? The power of all those who have gone before us, who have weathered these in-between times, not certain or in control, but holding on to faith with both hands. They are with us in our threshold times. No matter how gray or fragile the in-between time can feel, how hard it is to trust, we are never alone in that holy space. Brigid is there too, waiting here for us each year, inviting us to be less alone in the tension between here and where we are going. Inviting us, as the Irish mystic Anthony Murphy puts it, to totter on the brink of doubt and absolute belief without losing our balance. She knows the warmth of healing and growth lies just ahead. She knows that even in winter, all is still and gray. New life is taking shape underground, out of sight, gathering strength and form we cannot see yet. She knows that new life and the sustenance it brings will be here soon. Blessed be. Amen.
May it be so. Sorry about that. Sometimes I wonder when the ushers pick up those baskets. And by the way, I forgot to warn you that we've juggled things a little bit. You've probably noticed today. That's a good thing to shake things up. We pass the baskets even though many of us go online and click to fulfill our pledge to the church or to fulfill our donations to our charitable partners. But so why do we still pass the baskets? I'm going to use the words of Paul R. Beadle. he says this is not a practical exercise necessarily. It's not an empty ritual either. I agree with him that it's always been a ritual of worship, like lighting the chalice, like singing our beloved hymns. Even if your pledge is paid up, it's worthwhile to bring even just $1 to put in the basket or put in the envelope for bread of life as a ritual reminder that we practice that form of love we call generosity. So at this time, the ushers can pass the baskets. And thank you to each of you who shared today. We are grateful.
For our meditation today, we're going to hear the words of John O'Donohue from his piece For a New Beginning. And in a longer service, I would read it through multiple times to do the exercise I'm hoping we'll do, but we're going to do an abbreviated version. So you're only going to hear it once, but as you do, try to notice which words or phrases are making you feel something. It might be resistance or dread. It might be relaxation. It might be hope, joy. Whatever words make you feel something, try to hold on to them. And when the piece is through, I'm going to invite you to say your word or phrase aloud. Don't worry about remembering it perfectly. And the hope is that you'll talk on top of other people and we'll create kind of an auditory collage of what stood out to us and what we're feeling today. So first, just going to listen and feel which words or phrases make you feel something. In out-of-the-way places of the heart, where your thoughts never think to wander, this beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you were ready to emerge. For a long time, it has watched your desire, feeling the emptiness growing inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you had outgrown. It watched you play with the seduction of safety and the gray promises that sameness whispered. Heard the waves of turmoil rise and relent, wondered, would you always live like this? Then the delight, when your courage kindled, and out you stepped onto new ground, your eyes young again with energy and dream, a path of plenitude opening before you. Though your destination is not yet clear, you can trust the promise of this opening. Unfurl yourself into the grace of beginning that is at one with your life's desire. Awaken your spirit to adventure. Hold nothing back. Learn to find ease in risk. Soon you will be home in a new rhythm, for your soul senses the world that awaits you. Now, as you feel moved, please offer your word or phrase into the space. Grace of beginning. Amen. Our closing hymn is number 1068, Rising Green. And would you please rise in body or in spirit? We'll sing together. Forever sending you off with a good word to carry you into the meeting. However long your winter feels this year, whatever hopes you have carefully planted, whatever courage and learning you have sown, have faith, take heart. In the words of Frog, let the sun shine, let the rain fall. Soon your seeds will start to grow. Please be seated.
I believe this is the break between sermon and service and